When I first started studying herbs over 2 decades ago, I didn't start off by learning herbal energetics. Instead, I learned herbs, like many people do, by memorizing herbal actions, memorizing lists, and then throwing it all together. And when I started helping people with their health problems, this is the haphazard system that I was using. I had memorized that burdock was good for eczema, and so when I saw someone who told me I have eczema, that's what I recommended. Early on, I realized that while this mix and match method of herbalism worked sometimes, it didn't work other times. And when it didn't work, that made me really uncomfortable. People were coming to me for help, and my suggestions were helping only part of the time. Luckily, before I became too discouraged, I found out about herbal energetics. The term herbal energetics itself isn't super clear, and I've noticed that over the years that there's a lot of misunderstanding about exactly what herbal energetics are. In this episode, I'm sharing what people often get wrong about herbal energetics and why it bothers me. Hello and welcome to the Herbs with Rosalee podcast, a show exploring how herbs heal as medicine, as food, and through nature connection. I'm your host, Rosalee de la Forêt. I created this YouTube channel to share trusted herbal wisdom so that you can get the best results when relying on herbs for your health. I love offering up practical knowledge to help you dive deeper into the world of medicinal plants and seasonal living. Each episode of the Herbs with Rosalee podcast is shared on YouTube as well as your favorite podcast app. Transcripts and recipes for each episode can be found at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com or through the link in the video description. Also in the video description, you'll find other helpful resources. For example, to get my best herbal tips, as well as fun bonuses, be sure to sign up for my weekly herbal newsletter. Okay, grab your cup of tea and let's dive in. Herbal energetics is a system of matching herbs to people, and it's been used all over the world for an immeasurable amount of time. Because it exists on this global scale, there are many different ways of working with herbal energetics. Some of them are quite sophisticated and advanced and take many, many years of study to grasp. Traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda are a couple examples of these. I've found that most people who are wanting to work with herbs effectively for themselves and their family can benefit from learning a simplified system of herbal energetics. That way, they can feel more confidence that the herbs that they choose for their everyday health needs are going to work. But they don't have to spend a decade in school or thousands and thousands of dollars to do it. I've been teaching people about herbal energetics for well over a decade, and over the years, I've noticed that there are some common misconceptions about herbal energetics, both in what it is and also why it's important. I have to admit that some of these misconceptions annoy me, like a lot, because they're just based in these myths or just straight up misunderstandings. Ultimately, my success as an herbal teacher is seeing your success, and I know from personal experience that herbal energetics will help you be more successful with herbs. If you're interested in learning more about what herbal energetics is, then you're invited to join my free mini herbal energetics course that's happening right now and for the next week only. In this online training, you'll learn how to get the skills to be an herbalist so you can confidently choose the herbs that actually work for you and your family without having to memorize long lists of herbs or be fearful of making things worse. I'll be giving you a safety framework so you can feel more confident when we're working with herbs. We'll also have tea tastings, and you'll get a copy of the Herbal Energetics Flavor Wheel, which is a blueprint to herbalism itself. The mini Herbal Energetics course is going to be lots of fun. Just visit the show notes to get your free instant access today. And if you happen to be watching this or listening to this episode after the free mini course is over, no worries, you can also sign up for the next time it's offered. Okay, let's dive into it. The first and easily the most common misunderstanding about herbal energetics is that it is too woo-woo or mystical. And I totally get how this can happen. Just the word energetics sounds a bit ethereal. But herbal energetics is not woo and it's not mystical, like at all. In fact, it couldn't be more practical and grounded because it's based on your direct observations. If anything, herbal energetics, especially in its simplified form, is really all about common sense. Let me give you an example so you know exactly what I mean. Can you remember a time when your skin has been burned, maybe from too much sun exposure or perhaps a cooking accident? However the burn happened, I'm sure you can remember how it felt. Certainly there was pain, but there was probably another sensation: heat. A burn is an acute hot condition. We call it hot not because it's a mystical term, but because it's actually hot. It feels hot both to the person who has the burn as well as to someone else who puts their hands on the burned area. The burned area is often red, and it could even develop blisters. Again, these are more signs of actual heat. So, what do we do instinctively when we get burned? We try to cool it down. If you burn your hand while cooking, you might put it under cold water, or you might put ice on it. If you have a sunburn, you might reach for aloe gel or rose hydrosol or rose-infused vinegar. And when you put something cooling on a burn, it feels so good, right? Well, you basically have an imbalance of heat, and you're applying lots of coolness to restore that balance. A burn is a really easy example of applying herbal energetics. Something's hot and we want to cool it down. Admittedly, things get a little bit more complicated, but even still, herbal energetics is still based on practical observations, and it's not woo or mystical. Okay, let's talk about another common misconception. I've heard people say that they have no interest in studying herbal energetics because it's an antiquated form of medicine. They feel like this form of herbalism should be left in history, and instead, herbs should be used within a more updated, modern form of Western medicine. This often involves studying phytochemistry and isolated constituents within herbs, and relying heavily on published research. So I understand that for many of us growing up within the greater culture of Western medicine might feel this way. There's this underlying assumption that herbalism is rudimentary, and Western medicine, especially because it took over as the main form of medicine for many, is obviously the superior system. But the reality is more nuanced than this. The first thing to unpack is that the rise of modern Western medicine didn't happen organically because it was the natural evolution or progression from herbalism. Instead, it was a very calculated move by just a small group of rich individuals who were interested in for-profit medicines and ultimately the billions of dollars that they could earn from centralizing medicine and creating patented medicines. The history of the American Medical Association in the early 1900s is a bit much to go into right now, but this is a really heartbreaking and eye-opening history about the beginnings of modern medicine. Suffice to say, so-called alternative methods of healing were intentionally squashed by big money interests. In the past 100 years, several branches of modern medicine have evolved. There's acute or trauma medicine, which involves amazing feats of saving people after horrible car accidents or gunshots. Seriously, what surgeons can do is mind-boggling and amazing to me. And then there's chronic disease care. While there have been some important and life-saving interventions in this branch of care, on the whole, it's pretty depressing. Western medicine's approach to most chronic care isn't to cure it, but instead to manage and suppress symptoms through pharmaceutical interventions. So, for example, if someone has eczema, the focus is rarely on why that individual has eczema, but instead simply to give them steroid cream so that it goes away. Steroid cream initially has some pretty dramatic results, which can be impressive, but unfortunately, it doesn't last. The eczema almost always comes back, and then there are the negative side effects to deal with in the meantime, like the thinning of your skin. This is where herbal energetics really shines. When we use herbs in this system, we aren't trying to suppress or manage symptoms. Instead, we're working with a person's inherent healing abilities to help restore balance. In other words, we address the reason why someone has eczema so it can be solved and the eczema goes away. One way herbalists do this is through matching herbs to the person, which is a part of the herbal energetics model. So yes, there are some amazing aspects of modern medicine, especially in regards to trauma medicine. I wouldn't be without it myself. But modern medicine isn't always better than herbalism, especially when it comes to chronic disease. And modern medicine isn't the natural evolution or progression of medicine. The fact is, herbalism continues to be used all over the world because it works. In fact, many people, like myself, have found herbalism because Western medicine failed to help our chronic conditions. All right, third, another common misconception people can have about herbal energetics is that they think that learning about phytochemistry of an herb is more scientific and revealing than herbal energetics. This is a common misconception, and it annoys me because someone who believes this simply doesn't understand what herbal energetics is. Herbal energetics is, in part, the study of phytochemistry. I would even say it's the most practical and useful way to study phytochemistry, especially for the home herbalist. So let's just back up a minute to discuss what phytochemistry is. It's the study of what constituents are found within an herb. This can be a fascinating part of studying herbs and something that's especially important to know when making herbal medicine. But it can also lead to an overwhelming and frankly boring way to study herbs. That's because there are hundreds of constituents within a single herb. Let's take burdock, for example. A big picture view of burdocks' chemical constituents showed us that burdock's high in things like polysaccharides and inulin. But when you look at this complete picture of burdock's constituents, it's mind-boggling. So if you're watching this episode on the video, I'll share a screenshot of just some of the constituents found in burdock as per James Duke's ethnobotanical database. If you're listening without the video, rest assured it's an overwhelming amount of constituents. So yes, you could attempt to memorize all these constituents. And for many of these constituents, we have a good idea of how they may affect the body. But herbs aren't individual constituents. Practically every time someone has tried to isolate constituents and then declare that this one constituent is the healing property within a plant, it's ended up with poor results. In other words, phytochemistry can tell us a lot about a plant, but it only tells us so much. For example, two herbs can have similar chemicals, but their effects might vary dramatically because one is overall cooling and the other warming. Another consideration is that herbs aren't standardized. So when we see a list of constituents within an herb, that is the list for the individual plant that was tested. Another plant that was growing somewhere else might have different constituents. In fact, the methods of growing, harvesting, and processing can all dramatically influence the constituents within a plant. By learning how to interpret how herbs taste and smell and feel, you can get your own big picture view of that herb's phytochemistry. Is an herb really bitter? Maybe it's high in terpenes. Does it have a sweetness to it? It's probably high in polysaccharides. Does the herb make your mouth dry? Then it might be high in polyphenols like tannins. Over time, you can train your senses to assess the herbs in front of you. You can think of this as a practical phytochemistry for the home herbalist. So as I said, herbal energetics is the study of phytochemistry. Admittedly, it's a bit of a simplified approach. Your tongue can tell you that something is bitter, but it won't give you a definitive readout of all the bitter constituents within the plant. But it will tell you a lot, and it's a very practical tool that is especially useful if you don't have access to a multi-million-dollar lab. Phytochemistry is fascinating, but it's impossible to fully understand a plant simply based on its list of constituents. Let me put it this way. Do you think you'd know more about an apple by reading and memorizing a list of its constituents, or by eating an apple every day? Using your senses to understand herbs is one of the most powerful skills an herbalist can have, which is why it is the foundation of my own herbal teachings. The last misconception about learning herbal energetics comes from people who feel like it's better to learn herbal actions like carminative or anti-inflammatory, because that tells you more about an herb than knowing whether an herb is cooling or warming or drying or moistening. As someone who has studied herbs strictly from an herbal actions perspective and then later from an herbal energetics perspective, I can say 100% that knowing both is better than knowing just one or the other. If you only know herbs from their herbal actions, then you're seeing just a bit of an herb's benefits and gifts. And if you're using or recommending herbs based solely on their herbal actions, you'll get mixed results because you aren't seeing the whole picture. That reminds me of that story of people who are blindfolded and then asked to touch something and say what it is. Well, one person says, it's a hose. Another person says, it's a suitcase. Another says, it's a sharp tool like a plow. And when their blindfolds were removed, they saw they were all touching different parts of an elephant. Herbal actions, phytochemistry, and herbal energetics are all part of a plant. And if we ignore one, then we really aren't going to understand the herb and will be limited in our success of working with that herb. Many people today are learning about herbs with this limited viewpoint because they're only studying herbal actions or only studying phytochemistry. Herbal energetics is the practical system that shows you how to see and experience whole plant medicine. It helps you move beyond simple memorization so you can form relationships with herbs and truly get to know them and their healing abilities. If you're interested in learning more about what herbal energetics is, then you're invited to my free mini Herbal Energetics course that's happening right now for the next week only. In this video training, we'll go more in depth on exactly what herbal energetics is, including looking at your individual constitution, understanding plant energetics, and how to put it all together so you can successfully choose plants for people. Many people's favorite part of this training is the flavor wheel, which is a blueprint to understanding plant energetics through their taste. Again, this training is happening only for a short time. Check out the show notes to get the link to register for free. I'm excited to see you there. I deeply believe that this world needs more herbalists and plant-centered folks, and I'm so glad that you're here as part of this herbal community. Also, a big round of thanks to the people all over the world who make this podcast happen week to week. Nicole Paul is the project manager who oversees the whole operation, from guest outreach to writing show notes to actually uploading each episode and so many other things I don't even know. She really holds this whole thing together. Francesca is our fabulous video and audio editor. She not only makes listening more pleasant, she also adds beauty to the YouTube videos with plant images and video overlays. Tatiana Rusikova is the botanical illustrator who creates gorgeous plant and recipe illustrations for us. I love them. I know that you do too. Christy edits the recipe cards, and then Jenny creates them as well as the thumbnail images for YouTube. Alex is our tech support and social media manager, and Karen and Emily are our student services coordinators and community support. For those of you who like to read along, Jennifer is who creates the transcripts for us each week. Xavier, my handsome French husband, is the cameraman and website IT guy. It takes an herbal village to make it all happen, including you. Okay, you've lasted to the very end of the show, which means you get a gold star and this herbal tidbit. I'm really excited to be sharing the latest version of the flavor wheel with you. I created this wheel, I don't know, maybe it was 2011. It started out as these like really rough sketches of just like pencil on paper. And then I went to Facebook and I asked my friends if someone could help me design it digitally. And that's actually how I ended up meeting Emily Hahn, who I then later collaborated with to write Wild Remedies. And then we also created our course, Rooted Medicine Circle. To date, tens of thousands of people have downloaded this wheel. I mean, 1 year alone, it was like 60,000 people downloaded it. It's kind of what I'm most known for as an herbalist. And with the mini Herbal Energetics course, you're getting the most updated version. It's never been seen before. So I'm really excited to share it with you. I'll see you there.